This is the way I've been starting off all of them. Is that a couple weeks ago, if I was jogging on the trails, I would just jog past somebody, and neither one of us would even think of anything. Today, it's kind of, you see somebody, you're like, and we both instinctively are doing that. So that's the kind of thought processes that I'm thinking about right now, that we're in the middle of this coronavirus outbreak crisis. What are you feeling? Those type of things. That's what I'm kind of looking for.
Well, I mean, you're right. It is very interesting the kind of instinctual way that we're kind of conducting ourselves in public now. And honestly, I think a lot of that comes from the fact that now suddenly we're very hyper aware of the fact that there are a lot of people around us. I think that this is it's a new sensation, and I don't think that people are very accustomed to having to deal with. I mean, you go to the store, or you go walking around downtown, and you know, nowadays you're not always cognizant of the fact that there are people around you. I mean, you could be on your phone, you could have your mind on different things, but now this is something that's very tangible to us. Or I guess maybe not tangible, but it's something that's we're hyper aware of, this virus, this thing that we know very little about. And I think that it's interesting to see how people are reacting to it. I think you're totally right with that. So.
That's yeah. I think that's a great way of putting it. That we're always hyper aware of that. You know, people who have been around us all our lives, and now it's like, virus, virus, virus. You know,
Exactly, yeah.
and I don't know if you've had a chance to go to any stores recently or out and about and see that they actually have like places that you stand 6 feet from somebody at the checkout line.
Uh-huh. I haven't seen that yet, but I mean, I know that it's around. So.
And you know, right now, Lufkin and Nacogdoches, they have basically the stay at home, and any unessential businesses are closed right now. And
Mm.
so, like, in some places, they're only letting a certain number of people in a store at a time. To kind of, I don't know how they figure out the math of that, but whatever the square footage is with that. So that's really fascinating to me. The stores are closed. Uh, they're not open as long as they used to because they're supposedly, you know, cleaning afterwards or getting supplies in and everything. So
Yeah.
it's a big change with that as well. Um, so here's one question I've been asking everybody as well: is like, would you shake someone's hand right now?
You know, I've had the issue of introducing myself, and then, you know, habitually reaching out to shake someone's hand, and they've said, "Whoa, hey man, hold on, we can't do that right now," you know. So I've had to check myself on that a couple times, and it's just it's so different, you know. But it's interesting. I've That's one of the many things that we've kind of had like in our own heads to kind of try and rewire, and so it's been an exercise in mental fortitude, I guess would be a word to use. I don't really know.
Another question I've been asking is that after World War II, after 9/11, the country is different just after those big events. So, can you think about how the future will be different for this country after the coronavirus is over?
I do think that it's interesting to, you know, you think about how we're afforded a level of freedom, a degree of being able to act of our own free will and kind of just go and live our lives that way. And it is a little jarring to think about how now um, there are, you know, they're telling us we need to kind of curb some of our everyday habits and our everyday, you know, going about and just being in public. And I don't. It's really difficult to have a good sense of what's going to happen once this thing levels out. I mean, um, I'm sure that to an extent we'll go back to the way things were, but I don't. You know, it's hard to say what's gonna be gone forever and what's gonna go back to normal. You know, I just there's really no precedent for it. It's hard to have a sense of what's really gonna happen, especially when right now we don't even really know when this thing is gonna even out and when things are gonna try and go back to normal as it is. So it's hard to say. It really is.
Uh, do you have any idea when we can sort of go back to normal?
Um, I mean, no, I mean, really, honestly, no. I mean, you see just as much through the media as I do, and you know that schools and I mean, schools obviously, given your background, you know that they gave us everybody gave us a certain timetable to for their projected timetables to come back and for things to go back to normal, and it's pretty apparent that now that they're doubling down on everything being canceled and postponed, and now that things are being the things are getting bumped back, that the timetable really doesn't seem to have there doesn't really seem to be I'm trying to think of the right word for it, but just I mean, you know what I mean. There doesn't really seem to be an effect. Like, people don't really have a sense of when this thing is really going to die out. So it seems to me like it sounds like once we get around the end of next month, around May, that this thing ought to start, doing sort of this type situation. But I don't know. All I know is what I hear.
A lot of folks are saying sometime in June, things will sort of get back to normal. Maybe you think to the fall for everything to get back to 100%. Like some of the folks that are big sport fans, I asked, when's the next time you're going to go see a baseball game or basketball game or football game or sports, high school football or whatever?
I've given a lot of thought to this because it seems like all of my spring entertainment went up in smoke in about the course of a couple of days. So, um, you think about, the NBA season got curbed, right? A couple weeks before playoffs came around. Spring training for baseball had just kicked off and the opening of the season was coming up. I think opening day would have just happened the other day. Um, football is a while off, but we've got a draft coming up. We've got all sorts of off-season activities that all of these professional leagues rely on to keep their timetable moving. Just because they're not playing games doesn't mean they're not developing a schedule, developing players, getting ready to have 80,000 people in their seats. You hear talk about the NBA trying to, trying to find a way to get this thing going again and try to finish out the season sometime later in the year. But realistically, if you think about it, the season for them starts in November. And if your players, which get worked, I mean, they get worked in physical ways that you and I can't even imagine. If they don't get an off season, if the calendar is all jacked up, then it just doesn't make any sense to me. To me, in my head, it doesn't. Especially for basketball and baseball, which are happening or should be happening right now, it really doesn't make sense for me for them to try and pick up where they left off. You know what I mean? Like, I guess I'm speaking specifically for basketball because baseball would have just started and you could still probably get away with having a baseball season if this thing levels out in time for them to have enough time to finish it. But for basketball, because we'd be bleeding so far into their off season and they wouldn't have enough time to be ready for next season. I think for me, it would just make sense for them to just watch the season. I'm a big Mavs fan, and I'm missing out on my basketball.
Well, like if one professional athlete's ill with the coronavirus, that could spread obviously really quickly, and then the whole league is infected with the coronavirus, I'm guessing.
Yeah. I mean, it's just not worth it, honestly. Trying to bring this thing back early and trying to force the issue just doesn't make any real sense at this point, anyway. So,
is there anything else you want to say about the coronavirus, like time right now, what you're feeling, what you're seeing, what you're perceiving?
I think for me, I have been working. So I work in media. Texas Forest Country Living is my project. I write for it. I edit it, among all sorts of other things. And I've been blessed. So I've really the only thing that's starting to wear on me is I'm just getting a little bit of cabin fever, But I think that given my personal situation, all things considered, I think I've got it pretty good, honestly. It's definitely been an adjustment in social behavior for me, and especially the people in my house. just our habits have been, I mean, and it's the same with everyone. All of our habits have just been broken, and it's just, we're just trying to kind of even out. And really the first week for me was tough, not having restaurants, not having bars, not being able to really go out and socialize was tough. But I think that coming up here on week 2 and week 3, I've found ways to adjust. Not just sitting around at home watching TV and watching Ozark, because that's what I just started doing here today, actually earlier today. I've started kind of working on things around the house. Started working on things with my hands a little bit. And spending a little bit more time outside. And it's not. I think that what I've come to learn through all this is that just there's a positive to be gained out of this, and that the positive for me is finding new ways to stimulate the mind besides being glued to the television. Because I think that when I used to come home and have time at home, it was to counteract being away from the house. It was to counteract all the work that I had been doing away from the house. So I'd come home, I'd deflate, I'd sit down on the couch, I'd watch Amazon. But now that I'm home and spending my everyday life there, I think now I'm finding different ways to expend my energy. And honestly, I'm finding ways to live healthier, and it's not even really for much effort. I mean, it's just kind of happened organically, and it's interesting to experience. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm going to come out 40 pounds skinnier out of this thing, because I might be reaching a little bit, but I'm reading. I'm picking up books that I haven't read in a couple months and trying to finish them up. I'm working on my car outside. I'm cleaning the house. I'm going for walks in the evening because the weather has been nice. The last couple of days has been nice. And so it's interesting now that we're a couple weeks in to kind of see how things are developing organically. And the context of the situation is bad. It's not good. But I think that in all of this, still trying to exercise a degree of social responsibility and trying to stay out of the public and trying to socially distance and all that good stuff. I've found different interests and different ways to live. My routine has changed, and it's interesting to see as the weeks go by how that kind of develops.
That sounds great. Well, thank you so much.